If you could press your ear softly against the sky, as if it were a sleeping creature just beginning to stir, you might hear it breathing, not in huffs or gasps, but in long, measured sighs that move over oceans and rise up through trees. The air is always moving, always shifting, always whispering, even when we don't notice. It presses gently against your skin, curls around mountaintops, and slips through cracks in windows at dawn. It wraps the world like a silk scarf, weightless yet immense, invisible yet everywhere, holding within it the quiet machinery of clouds, winds, and rain. Weather in all its moods begins with this: an atmosphere in motion, draped around a spinning, sunlit planet. The atmosphere isn't just air, it's a layered mosaic of gases, from the breathable comfort of nitrogen and oxygen to the traces of argon and carbon dioxide that tweak and tune the climate. But it is more than chemistry, it is a living boundary, a floating theater where light plays with shadow and temperature dances with pressure. It stretches upwards more than 100 kilometers, growing thinner and colder as it rises, like a dream that fades the higher you go. Near the surface, it clings to us with warmth and touch. Up high, it becomes distant and blue, then black and silent. It is not solid or static. It shivers with heat, sighs with cold, and pulses with the heartbeat of the world beneath it. When you stand still and feel the wind lift a strand of your hair, you are feeling the result of a cosmic imbalance. It all begins with the sun, that glowing hearth 93 million miles away, pouring its energy into Earth unevenly. The tilt of the planet, the curve of its belly, the different colors and textures of its surface, all of these things conspire to warm some places more than others. And so the air rises. Warm air is like a balloon that wants to escape. It stretches, lightens, floats. And as it rises, cooler, heavier air rushes in to take its place. That's all wind really is: the great rearrangement of invisible things. A balancing act that never quite balances, like trying to keep water in one half of a teacup while the other half sloshes. And yet, within that imbalance lies beauty. A single puff of wind curling off a hillside carries the memory of sunlight, the temperature of stone, and the softness of passing leaves. Air is always moving from where it's too full to where it's too empty. That difference is called pressure, and it's what makes the sky restless. High pressure systems, calm and still like a breath held. Low pressure systems, swirling and moody like an exhale full of dreams. When pressure drops, clouds gather. When it rises, the sky's clear. The air doesn't think or plan. It simply responds, like water flowing downhill, like music filling a room. Even on the stillest day, the atmosphere is layered in quiet motion. From the surface to the uppermost fringes, where space begins to tickle the sky, it is divided not by walls, but by temperature. The troposphere, where all our weather lives, is the lowest and busiest layer, home to every cloud, every breeze, every raindrop. Above it, the stratosphere stretches cool and calm, where jet streams slide like silver threads across the globe. Then higher still, the mesosphere and thermosphere, where shooting stars burn and auroras dance. Each layer whispers to the one below it, carrying waves of energy, the hum of ultraviolet light and the sighs of solar wind. Sometimes, when the sky feels heavy and the clouds hang low like thoughts that haven't yet found words, we forget that we are walking through an ocean of air. It presses down on us with the weight of 10 tons per square meter, yet we hardly feel it. Our bodies are shaped by it, balanced against it, like birds that have grown used to the air around their feathers. If you were to climb a mountain, the pressure would fall, and so would the temperature. The air would become thinner, not just in weight, but in sound, in scent, in presence. It would feel like stepping into a quieter version of the world, where even your breath becomes a slow, careful ritual. All of this, the layers, the heat, the pressure, forms the skeleton of weather. But it is not rigid. It bends, it twists, it ripples with currents we cannot see, but sometimes feel. A butterfly flapping its wings in one corner of the world really can send echoes through the air, if not in storms, then in shifts, in shivers, in subtle rearrangements of the sky's breath. The air is a storyteller, and every molecule plays its part. It listens to the land, warms over deserts, or cools over oceans, and returns with news from distant continents. It carries pollen, perfume, smoke, salt. And always, it is changing. The surface of the earth speaks to the sky in patterns. Dark soil absorbs heat and warms the air above it. Snow reflects sunlight and keeps the cold close. Forests release moisture into the sky, as if sighing in green. Cities, with their hard angles and bright lights, bake the air into rising columns that drift and hover, waiting for night to cool them again. These small interactions build the scaffolding of weather, not sudden storms, but slow movements, long preludes to the drama of rain or the hush of snowfall. It's in these little exchanges that clouds begin to form, that air begins to stir, that pressure begins to fall. And then there is water, not just oceans and lakes, but vapor, always present, always on the edge of becoming something else. When warm air rises, it carries vapor with it, like secrets held too long. As the air cools, the vapor gathers, clinging to dust and salt and microscopic particles, condensing into droplets too small to see, then too many to ignore. A cloud is not solid. It is a floating field of questions. How warm is the ground? How cold is the air above? How long can I hold this water before letting go? Clouds aren't decorations. They are decisions waiting to be made. As you lie quietly beneath your ceiling or beneath the stars, you are also lying beneath billions of tons of atmosphere, gently moving, constantly changing. The weather doesn't begin with storms. It begins here, with the invisible, with the warm and cool push and pull of air, with the endless rearrangement of heat. Weather is not an interruption. It is the continuation of something older than mountains, older than trees, a process born when sunlight first kissed a spinning ball of rock wrapped in air, turning slowly beneath a distant star. And as the earth turns, as the sun lifts and lowers, the atmosphere stirs again. Morning breezes rise from sleeping fields, bringing with them the scent of dew and distant kitchens. Afternoon air climbs higher, full of warmth, lazy with possibility. Evening winds stretch long shadows over rivers, tugging at branches, brushing past windows, always moving, always listening. This is not just background noise. It is the pulse of the planet, the inhalation and exhalation of everything above the soil. We are creatures of the air, whether we feel it or not. Our moods shift with humidity. Our breath thickens in storms. Our memories sometimes smell like the wind before rain. Weather doesn't simply happen to us. We respond to it with our cells, our skin, our stories. We grow used to its patterns. We plan our days around its moods. But deep down, We know it as something greater, not chaos, but choreography, a sky that breathes, a world that listens, and a thin veil of gases that turns sunlight into whispers and motion into music. There is no single beginning to weather, no one moment where wind decides to blow or clouds decide to gather. It is all part of a long, slow current, heat rising, air flowing, water circling back into the sky. The atmosphere is not a place, it is a process, a restless companion that has never stopped moving, not once in all the time the earth has spun. And in that motion, in that balance between warmth and weight, the story of weather unfolds quietly, patiently, without end. If you were to follow a single beam of sunlight as it left the surface of the sun, drifting across the vacuum of space with no sound, no friction, no delay, you'd find that it carries not just light, but warmth, and not just warmth, but intention. When that sunlight touches Earth, it doesn't land evenly. It arrives at different angles, depending on latitude, season, and the gentle tilt of our planet's axis. Some of it falls directly, boldly, heating deserts and rooftops and dark fields of soil. Some of it skims across cloud tops or gets scattered in the atmosphere, turning blue sky into veil and gold into shadow. It is in this unevenness, this quiet imbalance of warmth, that weather is born. The sun doesn't try to make weather, it simply shines. But its light holds energy, and Earth is eager to receive it. Land warms quickly under the sun's gaze, heating the air above it. Water warms more slowly, but holds on to that warmth for much longer. And so, from the moment morning breaks, the world is already rearranging itself. Hot air rises, cool air sinks, pressure begins to change, and the invisible hands of the atmosphere begin to move. This is not chaos, it is choreography. The sun plays no favorites. It touches mountain and valley, ocean and city, glacier and grassland. But the way each place responds is different, and in that difference lies the stirrings of motion. You might not notice it as you sit in the stillness of early morning, but even the lightest breeze against your skin is part of a vast engine, powered by solar radiation, shaped by geography, and guided by ancient patterns. At the equator, where the sunlight arrives almost vertically, the air becomes hot, expands, and rises, creating a belt of low pressure. At the poles, where sunlight arrives at a slant, the air remains cool and heavy, sinking back toward the surface. In between, vast rivers of air form, circulating from high to low, from warm to cool, from sunlit ground to shaded sky. These are the trade winds, the westerlies, the polar easterlies, and the invisible highways that shepherd clouds across oceans. But the earth is not still. It turns. Slowly, patiently, once every 24 hours, it rotates beneath the sky, and that rotation adds a twist. Air moving north or south is bent gently to the right in the northern hemisphere, to the left in the southern. This bending is called the Coriolis effect, and it makes the wind curl instead of marching straight. It's why hurricanes spin counterclockwise in the north and clockwise in the south. It's why the air doesn't simply flow from pole to equator and back again, but instead coils into cells, Hadley, Ferrel, and Polar, each with their own rhythm, each shaping the wind like a sculptor shapes clay. These global winds are not merely background motion. They are the long arms of the sun's influence, reaching into every corner of the planet. They carry warmth from the tropics toward the poles and return with coolness in their wake. They push currents across oceans and lift clouds across continents. They spread seeds, bring rain, shape dunes, and carve valleys. They may feel soft against your cheek, but their patience can move mountains. And within these great atmospheric engines, there are more delicate threads, local winds that arise not from the planet's spin, but from contrasts just a few miles apart. A sun warmed hill next to a shadowed valley, a city of concrete beside a forest of leaves, a coastline where the sea lingers cool while the land wakes hot and eager. These differences create miniature breezes that dance through canyons and along beaches, tugging at window curtains and lifting the wings of birds. They are soft and fleeting, but they matter. Every gust of wind begins with sunlight. Every current of air is a memory of warmth. Even above us, in the high stratosphere, the sun's influence leaves its trace. Jet streams, those narrow bands of fast moving air, form where warm and cold air masses meet. They ripple around the globe like rivers of wind, shifting with the seasons, guiding storm systems, shaping weather far below. Pilots chase them to save fuel. Weather patterns bend around them like dancers in a current. Though they are invisible, they are no less real than the breeze that rustles the leaves outside your window. And yet, for all the sun's energy, not every bit of warmth stays. Some is reflected by clouds, some by ice and snow, some escapes back into space. What remains is caught gently by Earth's atmosphere, trapped and held by gases like carbon dioxide and water vapor that wrap the planet in an invisible embrace. This is the greenhouse effect, a natural warming that has allowed life to flourish for millions of years. Without it, our world would be frozen and silent. But like any embrace, it can become too tight. Too much heat held too long, and the balance begins to shift. The winds stir harder. The seas hold more vapor. The weather remembers, and it responds. But this isn't a story of catastrophe. It's a story of connection, of how sunlight, simple and steady, becomes wind, becomes cloud, becomes storm and calm alike. It is a story told through the bending of grasses, the curve of smoke rising from a chimney, the way the petals of a flower tremble just before dawn. The sun writes weather not in words, but in movement, light becoming heat, heat becoming air, air becoming motion. We are a part of this pattern. Our skin feels the warmth. Our lungs breathe the air. Our lives, though bounded by walls and windows, still respond to the sky. We open shades to let the sunlight in. We step outside and tilt our faces upward, as if remembering something the body knows, but the mind forgets, that warmth is not just temperature. It is invitation to wake, to grow, to move. The sunlight that touches your hand today began its journey over 8 minutes ago, launched from a boiling sea of plasma, traveled through the silence of space, and arrived at Earth just in time to warm the back of your neck, to catch in your eyelashes, to make the water in the air rise slowly from leaf and puddle and sea. That rising water, though invisible, becomes the next chapter of weather. But it starts here, with warmth, with the silent song of sunlight touching everything, waiting patiently for the atmosphere to respond. And so it does. Each day, from first light to sunset, the sun paints the world in motion. Warmth spreads, air rises, clouds form. Winds are born not with sound, but with intention. The weather doesn't rush. It unfolds, slowly, carefully, like a breath drawn in and held for just a moment longer. The sun is constant, but the earth responds in rhythm, not in repetition, and that rhythm shapes everything that comes next. If you ever closed your eyes on a quiet afternoon and imagined the wind not as something felt, but as something seen, you might picture it not as a rush or a force, but as a series of threads weaving softly across the world, invisible yarns connecting forest to mountain, desert to sea. These threads are everywhere. They curl around buildings, slide down canyon walls, skip across lakes, and swirl over cities like fingers brushing piano keys. The wind is not a single voice, but a symphony of motion, shaped by pressure, temperature, rotation, and time. And though it seems to arrive without warning, to rustle leaves, to lift a kite, to brush your skin like a whispered secret, it always has a reason. At its heart, wind is simply air moving from where there is more to where there is less. But that simplicity is an illusion. Beneath it lies a pattern older than memory. The Earth's surface is not flat, or even, or still. Some places absorb sunlight quickly, warming the air above them until it begins to rise like steam from a teacup. Other places, cooler or shrouded in cloud, hold their breath, keeping their air calm and dense and waiting. And in the space between these places, the wind is born, not because it chooses to move, but because nature does not tolerate imbalance. The winds closest to us, the ones we notice first, are shaped by this principle. A breeze that slides off the slope of a hill as the sun sets. A gust that races down a street between tall buildings. A hush of motion across the surface of a lake just as evening arrives. These are local winds, formed not by continents or oceans, but by hillsides, riverbeds, valleys, and rooftops. The land itself becomes a map of motion, and the air follows, tracing the contours of warmth and shadow like a curious traveler. At the shoreline, this balance plays out daily. During the day, land heats faster than water. The warm air above the beach rises, and cooler air from the ocean rushes in to fill the space. A sea breeze, soft and predictable. At night, the process reverses. The land cools quickly, the water stays warm, and now the wind flows back toward the sea. These gentle switches are not anomalies. They are earth breathing, each breath shaped by sunlight, each exhale carrying the memory of warmth. But as we step back from the local, the wind reveals its larger currents. It becomes not a gust, but a global system. The Earth's rotation, though slow and silent, twists these currents into elegant spirals. At the equator, warm air rises in wide columns, full of moisture and light. It moves upward, then outward toward the poles, where it cools, sinks, and returns along the surface. These great convective loops, Hadley cells, circle the planet, shaping the trade winds that blow from east to west near the tropics. Further from the equator, the Ferrel cells turn the pattern in the opposite direction, giving rise to the westerlies that shape weather in temperate zones. And near the poles, the final loops, the polar cells, complete the structure, bringing icy air downward and outward. Together, these three types of cells in each hemisphere form a slow-moving dance of heat and motion, orchestrated by the sun and spun by the earth. They are the reason ships once sailed west across the Atlantic and east across the Pacific. The risen clouds gather where they do. The resin weather travels. Embedded within these currents are the jet streams, thin, high-altitude rivers of air that twist and snake their way around the globe. They flow fastest where temperature contrasts are greatest, often between air masses that would prefer not to meet. The polar jet stream, for instance, races along the boundary between cold Arctic air and warmer air to the south. It doesn't flow in a straight line. It meanders, forming ridges and troughs, sometimes bringing unseasonable warmth, other times ushering in cold fronts that stretch across continents. The jet stream doesn't push the weather, it guides it, like a conductor nudging the notes of a quiet orchestra. Sometimes, these winds can be capricious. They carry more than just air. They lift dust from deserts and scatter it over oceans, feeding plankton and fertilizing forests. They sweep wildfire smoke across mountains and over cities, turning sunsets into strange paintings of amber and violet. They carry pollen, seeds, even tiny spiders, drifting through the upper air on silken threads. The wind is not just motion, it is memory. It carries pieces of one place to another, traces of warmth and water, whispers of forest and field. There are places in the world where the wind becomes something more than breeze or draft or whisper. In the Mistral of France, the air funnels through valleys with a cold clarity that clears skies and thoughts alike. In the Santa Ana winds of California, warm, dry air spills from desert to coast, stirring wildfires and restlessness. In the Andes, the Zonda sweeps down the mountains, sudden and strong, with breath stolen from glaciers. These winds are local, yet legendary. They have names, characters, reputations. They are not just weather, they are presence. And there are moments when the air grows still, heavy, as if holding its breath. A lull before a summer storm. The silence just after snowfall. In these moments, we are reminded that wind, for all its power, is not constant. It ebbs and flows like water, responding always to the pressures that surround it. When air grows heavy with heat, when clouds build and tension thickens, the wind may vanish for a moment, only to return with sudden urgency, bending trees and lifting leaves, reminding us that it was always waiting. Not all winds are born from warmth. Some are born from storms, spun into being by pressure falling fast and air rushing inward. A cyclone begins as a sigh, a gentle disturbance in the air, but with time and heat and moisture, it grows, spinning faster, drawing in winds from every direction. The air doesn't know it's becoming a storm. It's simply following the rules, responding to pressure and motion, carrying energy from sea to sky. And in this swirling motion, wind becomes more than air. It becomes force, system, spiral, life. The boundaries between these systems are never hard edges. One wind blends into the next. A local breeze may be shaped by a global current. A gust may be borrowed from a jet stream overhead. It is all part of a continuum, stitched together by pressure and time. The air above your home is not separate from the air above distant mountains or faraway oceans. It is the same breath, flowing slowly from place to place, remembering where it came from, learning where it is going. We walk through this motion every day, rarely noticing it, yet deeply shaped by it. The air that fills your lungs has traveled far. It may have cooled over tundra, picked up warmth from city streets, passed through the shadow of a mountain, or drifted quietly over the sea. It carries with it stories, not in words, but in scent and softness and sound. The rustle of leaves is not just decoration, it is the sound of the earth adjusting, the atmosphere thinking out loud. And just as the wind shapes the sky, it shapes us, We turn our heads to face it. We build our homes to shelter from it. We learn its moods, guess at its directions, follow its flow. It has no hands, yet it touches everything. It has no voice, yet it speaks in sighs and roars. It carries the warmth of the sun, the scent of the rain, the rhythm of the earth. We may never see it, but we know when it's near, and always it is near. If you were to gaze up on a quiet afternoon and let your eyes settle on the slow drift of clouds, you might begin to see not just their shapes, but their stories. A soft, billowing puff, like a giant sheep resting in the sky. A thin veil stretched across the blue, like gossamer threads of a forgotten dream. A towering pillar that swells like breath held in. Clouds are more than decoration. They are the sky's diary, written not in ink, but in moisture, revealing the silent thoughts of the atmosphere above us. They mark where air has risen, where heat has shifted, where wind has gathered water from oceans, lakes, leaves, and skin. Each cloud begins as something unseen and ends as something we cannot ignore. To understand how clouds form, imagine the air around you as a sponge. It holds water, not in droplets or puddles, but as vapor, invisible and patient. When the air is warm, that sponge can hold more. But as the air rises, carried upward by heat, or lifted by mountains, or nudged by a cold front, it begins to cool. The sponge tightens, its grip weakens, and the water it once carried so quietly begins to gather. It finds tiny particles of dust, salt, or pollen, microscopic seeds in the sky, and wraps itself around them. At first, the droplets are too small to fall, too light to do anything but float. But together, they create a visible change, a wisp, a smear, a bloom of cloud. There are different types of clouds, each with its own rhythm, its own purpose. Cumulus, the fluffy dreamers, pile up like soft thoughts on warm afternoons. They form when the ground heats quickly, sending warm air soaring upward, gathering moisture like stories told over fire. Stratus, the low-hanging blankets, spread out in layers, soft and gray, often whispering of drizzle or quiet mornings. Cirrus clouds, high and thin, drift like feathers across the upper sky, made not of water droplets, but of ice crystals dancing where the air is too cold for rain. And then there are the mighty cumulonimbus, the storm bearers, towering giants that rise like mountains into the sky, their tops spreading out like anvils, their hearts pulsing with lightning and rumble. Each cloud is a reflection of the air beneath it, a mirror held up to the earth's surface. On a still morning after rain, low fog may gather in valleys, resting like misted breath over the land. On hot afternoons, thunderheads may swell above fields and forests, casting long shadows and humming with electric thought. In winter, clouds grow heavy and slow, their bellies dragging the light down until snow begins to fall like the sky remembering how to whisper. And yet, despite their constant presence, clouds are fleeting. They form, they drift, they vanish. They are always in between air and water, between motion and stillness, between sunlight and shadow. They do not hold their shape for long, but while they last, they are messengers. A low gray sky speaks of calm, steady rain. A halo around the moon at night may hint that cirrostratus clouds are gathering and that storms could follow. Wispy clouds high above may tell of a jet stream overhead, dragging thin threads of ice through the sky. Sometimes clouds surprise us. Lenticular clouds perch over mountain peaks like silent UFOs, formed by the rising and falling of air as it flows over ridges. Mammatus clouds sag from the base of thunderheads like the underbelly of a breathing animal. Asperitas clouds ripple and churn, sculpted by turbulence, as if the sky itself were made of water. And then there are iridescent clouds, glowing with pastel hues, bending light through tiny droplets into colors that shimmer like oil on stone. But even the plainest cloud, the most ordinary layer of gray, holds within it a history of sunlight, air pressure, and geography. The way the land heats, the way the wind curls around hills, the way moisture evaporates from tree canopies after a rain, all of these leave fingerprints on the clouds that form above. They are born from warmth but cooled by height. They are shaped by motion but stilled by weight. They are neither light nor dark by themselves, only by how they catch or block the sun. Sometimes they seem to hold the light inside them. Other times they hide it, turning the world a soft and sleepy blue. We often think of clouds as distant, drifting things, but they are intimately connected to us. The water they hold may once have been part of a distant ocean, or perhaps the moisture from your breath on a winter's morning. When they rain, they return that water to the ground, to streams and rivers and leaves. When they snow, they lace the land in quiet. When they clear, they open the sky again to light and warmth. Clouds are part of the cycle, not above it. They are not a pause between events. They are the events. Even as we sleep, clouds are forming above us. A fog bank rolls in over a meadow. A field of cumulus breaks apart under starlight. High above, cirrus clouds ride the wind like ships sailing in the thin air. And when morning comes, the light catches in their curves, painting the sky in blush and gold. The sunrise isn't just color, it's reflection, refraction, the scattering of light through droplets suspended between rising and falling. It's weather in its most poetic form. If you were to stand on a mountaintop and look out at the sea of clouds below you, you'd see how much of the world floats. Cities disappear beneath fog. Hills look like islands. The sky touches the land not with weight, but with softness. There's a feeling of suspension, of being between layers, sky above, sky below, and in between, a world of drift and hush. And yet clouds are also the architects of what comes next. When enough droplets gather, when the air can no longer carry them, they begin to fall, sometimes gently, like a sigh, sometimes in sudden bursts, like the sky unburdening itself. The beginning of rain is the end of one cloud's journey and the start of another. Those drops fall through layers of air, growing, splitting, colliding. They cool the ground, they nourish the soil, they fill rivers and feed roots. They arrive without apology, without rush. They simply fall. Before the first drop touches earth, you can often feel it. The air changes. The wind shifts. The light takes on a different tone, as if the sky has lowered its voice. That moment, just before rain, is a threshold. The world grows still. Birds go quiet. Leaves turn. And then the rain begins, not with thunder, but with the quiet pattering of returning water. It is not an intrusion, it is continuity. Clouds, rain, air, they are all part of the same breath, rising and falling, warming and cooling, forming and releasing. To understand clouds is to listen to the language of the sky, not just to see what is above, but to feel the way it shapes what is below. They are not permanent, but they are consistent, always becoming, always dissolving, always holding the moment before it changes. And though they disappear as quickly as they arrive, their memory remains. In puddles on the pavement, in mist on the window, in the scent of rain clinging to soil and stone. They may drift far, but their presence lingers. The sky never forgets its clouds, and neither do we. Speaks. If you listen carefully on a gray morning, when the air feels dense and the world has hushed its colors, you might hear the sound of water returning to earth, not all at once, but drop by drop, like the slow plucking of invisible strings. Rain begins not with thunder or drama, but with stillness, a quiet shift in temperature, a thickening of air, a change in the rhythm of birdsong. It is the sky exhaling something it has held for too long, a release, a gentle surrender. Rain is not sudden, it's a process that begins long before the first droplet falls. To understand rain, you have to follow the life of a cloud. A cloud is not simply a floating thing, it's a holding pattern. Water vapor rises with warm air, cools as it ascends, and condenses around tiny particles until it forms droplets too small to fall. These droplets bump and merge and drift, suspended by updrafts and balanced against gravity. The longer they float, the larger they grow. When they become too heavy for the air to hold, they begin to descend, slowly at first, then more surely as the air gives way. What begins as a mist becomes a shower. What starts as a whisper becomes a patter, a rhythm, a lullaby. Each drop of rain is a tiny traveler. Formed high above, it falls through layers of atmosphere, passing through different temperatures, picking up speed, changing shape. Some fall straight, some are blown sideways, some evaporate before they reach the ground, a phenomenon called virga, ghost rain, visible but untouchable. Others make it all the way down, dotting sidewalks, soaking roots, painting windows with moving watercolor streaks. Rain touches everything but demands nothing. It falls equally on rooftops and riverbeds, on pavement and petals, on the back of your hand as you hold it out to greet the sky. Rain doesn't come in just one form. There's the soft drizzle that feels like breath against your skin, each drop so small it almost hovers. There's the steady shower that seems to settle in for the afternoon, tapping gently on roofs like fingers on a tabletop. And there's the downpour, sudden and insistent, turning streets into streams and umbrellas into islands. Each type tells a different story about the air above, how much moisture it holds, how quickly it rises, how impatient the sky has become. Sometimes rain is cold, born from clouds that stretch low across the land, wrapped in the chill of early morning. Other times, it is warm, pulled from summer skies that billowed high and bright just hours before. Warm rain has its own feeling, a softness, a kind of forgiveness. You can walk through it and feel not soaked, but embraced. Cold rain is different, sharper. It reminds you that the air has let go of something it could no longer hold. Rain is more than water falling. It's part of a cycle so vast and ancient that no beginning can be found. The oceans give themselves to the sky through evaporation. The sky gives it back through precipitation. Rivers carry it home again. And all along the way, it is used, filtered, transformed. Plants draw it through their roots and exhale it through their leaves. Animals drink it, carry it, return it. Even the air breathes it, a holding and releasing moisture with each rise and fall of temperature. When you feel the dampness in the air, you're feeling the atmosphere remembering the sea. And there is something else, something quieter, harder to define, the feeling just after rain, The world smells different, richer, as though the earth has opened its pores. This scent has a name, petrichor. It comes from plant oils, from soil bacteria, from the chemistry of rocks and roots that, when wet, release their essence into the air. It's a smell of arrival, of renewal, as if the planet has been rinsed clean and something new is beginning. Rain is both ending and beginning, washing away dust and carrying life where it's needed. Rain doesn't only nourish, it shapes. Over time, raindrops carve channels into mountains, carry sediment to valleys, polish stones, deepen streams. Every canyon, every creek bed, every meander of every river began with rain. Soft though it may be, water is persistent. A raindrop falling today may become part of a glacier centuries from now, or it may flow into a gutter, into a drain, into a stream, then a river, then a sea, only to rise again. The drop is gone, but the water endures. The motion is never lost. Rain connects people too. A sudden downpour can gather strangers beneath shared awnings. Children dash and laugh in puddles. Windows fog with breath and warmth. Poets write of it. Musicians mimic it. Memory often wears the smell of it. It is hard not to feel something stir inside when the rain begins to fall. Maybe it's comfort, maybe nostalgia, maybe the deep, ancient recognition that this rhythm, this sound, has been with us always. And yet, not all rain is gentle. When too much moisture gathers too quickly, storms can form. Rain becomes a torrent, overwhelming soil and stream, breaking banks and filling streets. In some places, rain is so rare that its sudden arrival becomes an event. In others, it is so frequent that its absence is the surprise. But always, it is part of the balance. Too little, and the earth cracks. Too much, and the earth slips. But when it comes just right, everything responds. Seeds stir, moss thickens, birds lift their heads and sing again. Rain begins with invisible changes, rising air, condensing vapor, shifting winds. It ends with something tangible, a world washed, cooled, softened. The drops that land on your skin may have been part of a distant ocean, a glacier, a cloud thousands of miles away. They are travelers, yes, but also messengers. They carry with them the story of the sky and the promise of growth. You don't have to do anything but step outside and feel it. And sometimes, when rain falls at night, there's a special kind of quiet. The world wraps itself in the sound, the soft drumming on roofs, the tapping against glass, the sigh of water on soil. You can lie in bed and listen, and it feels as though the sky is speaking not in words, but in rhythm, a language the earth knows, a lullaby without end. Even after the rain stops, it lingers, in the glistening of leaves, in the mirror of puddles, in the hush of the air. The sky does not hurry to clear. Clouds drift slowly, releasing the last of their burden. The wind shifts, the light returns, pale and gentle, and everything feels changed, not drastically, but enough, as if the world has exhaled and now waits to breathe in again. Rain is not just a weather event. It's an atmosphere remembering how to let go, a rhythm returning to its source, a gesture of connection between sky and soil. And in its falling, in its soft and steady descent, it reminds us that even the heaviest things can return to earth with grace. Sometimes the sky doesn't whisper, it rumbles. Not sharply at first, not in anger, but in a deep, distant growl that rolls through the air like a thought waking slowly. A low sound that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, pressing gently against your chest as if the atmosphere itself were stretching its limbs. Then a pause, then light, sudden, silver, cutting through the clouds with impossible precision. Thunder and lightning, dancing together in a storm that doesn't just fall from the sky, but rises from the earth too, built by heat, shaped by motion, and alive with charge. A thunderstorm begins like a breath drawn too deep. It starts when warm, moist air near the ground rises quickly into the sky, climbing higher and higher through layers of cooler air. As it rises, it cools, condenses, and forms clouds. But not just any clouds. These are tall, towering cumulonimbus clouds, massive structures of swirling moisture and energy that can reach heights of over 10 miles. They grow like mountains made of vapor, their peaks turning icy white, their bases dark and heavy, like the underside of a giant ship sailing across the sky. Inside these clouds, the air churns. Warm air continues to rise, while cooler air sinks, creating powerful updrafts and downdrafts that stir the cloud from within. Water droplets collide with ice crystals, separating charges like socks clinging to a sweater in the dry air. The cloud becomes a living battery, its top charged positively, its bottom negatively. The separation builds, waiting for the moment the air between them can no longer resist. Then lightning. But lightning isn't just a flash, it's a bridge, a sudden connection made through air that has become momentarily willing to conduct. The bolt moves faster than thought, heating the air around it to 5 times the temperature of the sun's surface. That superheated air expands explosively, creating a shock wave that we hear as thunder. The two are inseparable. Lightning writes the message, as thunder delivers the sound. We see them as separate, but they are one event, split only by the time it takes for light and sound to reach us. You can count the seconds between flash and rumble to guess how far away the storm is. 5 seconds means 1 mile, 10 seconds, 2. But there's something comforting in that rhythm. The sudden brilliance, followed by the slow voice of the sky. Lightning doesn't announce itself. It arrives, speaks in light, then steps back into silence. Thunder follows, always a few heartbeats behind, rolling like memory through the clouds. Storms can be brief or long, fierce or gentle. Some form over open plains, rising in the heat of the afternoon, then drifting away by night. Others build slowly, nurtured by warm ocean air, growing into immense systems that travel for hours, even days. But no matter their size, they carry the same ingredients: warmth, moisture, instability, and lift. The more of each, the stronger the storm. The taller the cloud, the greater the tension. The more dramatic the contrast between air masses, the louder the sky speaks. Inside the storm, rain begins to fall. Not the soft patter of a passing shower, but the urgent rhythm of water pulled down by gravity and momentum. Drops grow larger as they collide and combine, falling faster, harder. In some storms, the updrafts are so strong they suspend droplets long enough to freeze, forming hailstones that rise and fall through layers of air, adding layer after layer of ice. Eventually they become too heavy, and they fall, not as gentle rain, but as spheres of frozen sky, bouncing, tumbling, cracking open leaves and rooftops with their cold insistence. Storms are dramatic, yes, but not malevolent. They're just the atmosphere trying to balance itself, to redistribute energy, to shed heat and moisture. Thunderstorms are the sky's most expressive form of relief. They form when the earth is too warm, the air too full, the moisture too eager. They resolve tension, and once the energy is spent, once the rain has fallen and the charges have equalized, they fade, leaving behind damp ground, fresh air, and skies that slowly brighten again. Sometimes, in the heart of a storm, something extraordinary happens. A bolt of lightning strikes, not just downward, but sideways, jumping between clouds, or upward toward space, forming a rare and ghostly sprite, a jellyfish shaped glow above the cloud tops. These high altitude events are fleeting, visible only from afar, and remind us that storms don't stop at the surface. They stretch upward, touching the edge of space, connecting the ground to the stars in flickering pulses. Animals know when storms are coming. Birds fall silent, dogs pace. The air thickens, the pressure drops, and something ancient inside all creatures wakes up. Long before we had radar or satellites, we watched the sky, felt the wind, listened for thunder. The sudden stillness, the way trees stop swaying, the way insects vanish, a storm, is never truly sudden. It sends signals, if we know how to read them. Even our bodies sometimes sense the change. A headache, an ache in the knees, a restlessness. We are not separate from the weather. We are shaped by it. After the storm, the world seems sharper. Colors deepen. The scent of ozone lingers. Fresh, metallic, electric. Leaves drip quietly. Streams surge. Puddles reflect the soft gray of lingering clouds. It's a pause, a hush, as if the planet itself is catching its breath. The birds return cautiously. The air is cooler, washed, renewed. In that moment, you can feel the passage of something. Not just rain or wind, but a kind of energy that has moved through, rearranged, released. Some nights, storms stay distant, flickering on the horizon like silent fireworks. You can lie in bed and watch the sky pulse with white and violet, too far away to hear, but close enough to see. It feels like the sky dreaming or remembering. Each flash a moment of recognition, a reminder that something powerful and beautiful is unfolding, even when all around you is quiet. Storms remind us that the sky is alive, that air and water, heat and motion can combine into something more than the sum of their parts. That light can split the sky. That sound can roll through your chest and out across the land. And yet, for all their grandeur, storms end. Always. They exhaust themselves. The rain slows. The clouds break. The sun returns, sometimes with a rainbow curved delicately across the sky, bending light through lingering drops, like the storm's final smile. You might think of storms as interruptions, but they are continuations. They do not pause the weather. They are the weather, reaching its most expressive form. They are part of the atmosphere's language, a burst of exclamation in a paragraph of sky. And when they pass, the world does not resume. It begins again, freshly quiet, deeply green, and softened by water. If you were to cup your hands and catch a snowflake as it fell, you'd be holding something that took its shape in silence, something born high in the clouds, shaped by air temperature, humidity, and time. Something that, for a moment, it exists only to drift and disappear. Snow doesn't fall the way rain does. It dances. It swirls and glides, drifting sideways and downward at once, as if uncertain where to land. It arrives not with force, but with presence, a quiet insistence that changes the world without noise, a gentle breath from the coldest part of the sky. Snow begins like rain in a cloud filled with moisture, but instead of forming droplets, The vapor turns directly into ice, crystallizing around microscopic particles of dust or pollen in the freezing upper atmosphere. These tiny ice crystals grow outward, their shapes governed by temperature and humidity. No two snowflakes are identical, not because they're magical, but because the path each one takes through the cloud is different. A little colder here, a little drier there, and suddenly a star becomes a feather, a plate becomes a branch. Snowflakes are geometry with memory, each arm reflecting the choices the crystal made as it grew. They start so small, barely visible. Then they combine, clumping into flakes, held together by fragile bonds of cold and water. As they grow heavier, gravity invites them downward, but they don't rush. They descend at their own pace, slowed by air, steered by breeze, shaped by motion. A single snowflake can take up to an hour to fall from cloud to ground, and in that hour, it passes through layers of air, each one different, each one leaving its mark on the crystal's shape. Snow doesn't fall in silence, it creates it. When enough snow settles on the ground, it muffles sound. The world grows quieter, softer, more distant. Footsteps become whispers, cars seem to glide, even voices seem to slow, as if the snow asks us to speak more gently. It isn't just imagination. Fresh snow traps sound, each flake absorbing the vibrations that normally bounce across hard surfaces. It's like the earth has been wrapped in cotton, cradled in quiet. There are many kinds of snow, light, powdery flakes that swirl like ash in a winter breeze. Heavy, wet snow that clings to branches and bends them earthward. Icy pellets that sting the skin, formed when snow partially melts and refreezes on its descent. Each tells a different story of the air it passed through, the cloud it came from, and the ground it touches. A dusting on a rooftop is not the same as a blizzard in the mountains, but both speak the same language, the sky releasing water in its coldest, most delicate form. Snow is transformation. It takes the familiar, roads, trees, fences, rooftops, and renders them strange and new. Curves soften, edges blur. The world becomes monochrome and yet more intricate. Shadows deepen, tracks appear where none were before. Foxes, birds, a child running in boots too large. Snow reveals motion. It records stories as they happen and holds them until the sun returns. Underneath it all, life slows. The ground sleeps, held beneath a blanket of white that insulates more than it chills. Snow is cold, but it keeps the soil beneath it warmer than the air above. Seeds rest in that dark quiet, waiting for the thaw. Animals burrow, cocooned in earth and straw. Trees stand still, their roots dreaming deep in the dark. Winter is not the end of life, but its pause. A season not of stillness, but of preparation. Sometimes snow comes with wind. It drifts and piles, forming sculptures in ditches and fields, tracing the air's movements across land and stone. Blizzards arrive when snow and wind combine in earnest. Visibility shrinks, horizons vanish. The world becomes a shifting white tunnel with no clear edge. In those moments, even light seems unsure, scattered by flake and swirl. It's easy to feel small in a snowstorm, to feel the weight of sky and air and cold pressing in. And yet, once inside, with walls between you and the wind, there is a deep comfort, a cup of something warm, a blanket, a window that frames the falling snow like a painting in motion. Children know snow differently. It's not silence to them, it's invitation. They run to meet it, to touch it, to mold it into balls and angels and forts. They crunch across it with delight. They watch it fall with the wide eyed joy of seeing the world renew itself. And in that, they are right. Snow isn't just a change in weather, it's a reset, a fresh page, a world cleaned and waiting to be written on again. And when the sun returns, snow transforms once more. It glitters, reflecting light from every tiny surface. It drips, melts, recedes. Icicles form, sharp, slow growing spears that catch light like glass. Puddles appear, shining with fragments of sky. Snow becomes water again, flowing into gutters, into soil, into streams. It does not vanish, it moves. Even the crystals that remain, those tucked in shady corners or hidden beneath trees, continue to change. Snow compacts, reshapes. Over time, layers press down upon each other, forming firmer, heavier structures. In high mountains and polar regions, this compaction becomes permanent. Snow becomes fern, fern becomes ice, ice becomes glacier. And that glacier, slow and immense, begins to move, not today or tomorrow, but over years, centuries. What fell as a flake may one day shape valleys, carve cliffs, feed rivers. There is something timeless in snow. It falls as it has for millions of years. The same process, the same physics, the same delicate balance of temperature and motion. Our ancestors watched it fall. They stepped carefully through its drifts, warmed their homes against its chill, listened to the same quiet it brings now. In every culture where snow appears, stories follow of transformation, of silence, of renewal, of white fields that hold a sky. And yet, snow is always personal. The way it lands on your coat, the feeling of a flake melting on your cheek, the hush that follows a heavy snowfall when even your thoughts seem slower, more reflective. It invites pause, both in the world and in ourselves. It slows time, not by force, but by suggestion. Walk slower, it seems to say. Look closer, listen. Listen was at night. Snow glows. It catches what little light there is. Street lamps, moonlight, distant windows, and returns it gently. You can walk through a snowy night without a flashlight, guided by reflection alone. The world becomes a little brighter, even in darkness. Sound carries further. Breath curls in the cold. Each footstep becomes a soft print in a temporary record. In the morning, they will still be there, a reminder that you passed through. And when snow finally melts, it does so gradually, reluctantly. The world reemerges slowly, one patch of grass, one stone, one step at a time. The meltwater flows downhill, eager to rejoin rivers, to find its way back to the sea. And when it does, it carries with it the memory of its fall. Snow returns not only to water, but to motion, to life. It is easy to think of snow as absence, as the lack of warmth, the loss of color. But it is presence. It is the sky touching earth with the lightest of hands. It is water taking its most intricate, most fragile form. It is the atmosphere whispering through pattern and quiet. And when it falls, it does not ask for attention. It simply covers the world, gently, patiently, completely. There are mornings when the world seems to have forgotten where it ends, when the trees across the street dissolve into softness, when rooftops drift into nothing, when the horizon curls inward like a dream. On those mornings, the sky and the ground seem to merge, wrap together in something delicate and damp. You open the door, and the air feels different, not just cooler, but quieter, heavier, as though each breath were wrapped in cotton. This is fog, and it doesn't arrive with thunder or wind. It slides in unnoticed, not a storm, but a hush, a soft veil drawn across the face of the world. Fog is a kind of cloud, not above us, but among us, a cloud that has come down to walk beside trees and lamp posts and sidewalks. It forms when the air near the ground cools enough for water vapor to condense into tiny droplets, so small and fine that they float in place, suspended in silence. Sometimes this happens after rain, when the ground is damp and the night has been still. Sometimes it comes after a warm day, when evening cools the surface and draws moisture from the air like breath on glass. The droplets hang in place, too light to fall, too real to ignore. There are different kinds of fog, each with its own character. Radiation fog, which forms on clear, calm nights, creeps in quietly and clings to valleys like a memory. Advection fog rolls in with the wind, spreading over cold surfaces like a slow tide. Sea fog lingers, where warm air drifts across cold water, and upslope fog trails along the backs of mountains like a whisper rising. Even your own breath on a cold day is a kind of miniature fog, a visible exhale of moisture that cannot stay hidden in the cold. Mist is its lighter cousin, more transparent, more fleeting, blurring the edges but not erasing them. You can still see the road ahead, but just barely. The light from a street lamp seems to scatter, haloed and glowing. The world looks gentler, as if it has softened its tone, as if it's asking us to move a little more slowly, to watch where we step, to listen for what we cannot see. Fog doesn't fall. It gathers, it drapes, it wraps, and in doing so, it reshapes space. A walk you know well becomes mysterious. A familiar park looks like a forest from a different land. Even sound behaves differently. In fog, sound is absorbed, scattered, redirected. A dog's bark seems closer. A footstep echoes faintly and then vanishes. The usual rhythm of noise is changed, muffled. The world becomes introspective. To drive through fog is to pass through a moving painting, one that reshapes itself every few meters, revealing just enough to move forward, but never enough to know what lies far ahead. It teaches us to trust our memory, to go slowly, to understand that clarity can be local, temporary, and yet still meaningful. The fog does not remove the world, it redefines how we see it. And when the sun begins to rise, it doesn't scatter the fog at once. Light filters through it, silver and soft. It spreads gradually, warming the droplets, coaxing them back into vapor. As it lifts, the fog reveals the world again, piece by piece, branches first, then fences, then the full shapes of homes and hills. The lifting of fog feels like a slow awakening, as though the earth is opening its eyes. But fog doesn't just live in valleys or mornings. It exists wherever warm and cold meet gently. You can find it drifting across meadows at dusk, coiling through city streets before dawn, brushing against the ocean's edge like a hand dipped in ink. In the jungle, it rises every afternoon, feeding moss and vines. In high mountains, it swirls between cliffs like smoke. It is not rare, only quiet. It's always waiting for the right mix of air and moisture and stillness. There's another kind of fog, one that rises from within. When the weather is humid and still, when sweat clings and the air presses in, we speak of heaviness, of thickness, as if the atmosphere itself has weight. This too is a kind of fog, more emotional than visible, more felt than seen. It changes how we move, how we think. It slows us. It reminds us that weather is not only something around us, it becomes part of us too. In literature, fog often stands for mystery, for the unknown, for journeys not yet revealed, but it can also mean comfort. There's a reason stories begin in fog. It sets a tone not just of suspense, but of softness, of something beginning to take shape. Fog is a cradle for stories. It allows the world to blur so that we might imagine more clearly. Even plants respond to fog. In places where rain is rare, certain trees have adapted to drink fog directly. They trap the droplets on their leaves and let them run down into their roots. In deserts near cold oceans, entire ecosystems survive on this drifting moisture, harvesting it from the air one drop at a time. Fog is not always abundant, but where it comes, it gives. In cities, fog glows. Streetlights turn golden. Car headlights carve tunnels of light. Even in places crowded with noise and motion, fog transforms the atmosphere into something quieter, more dreamlike. It slows traffic, softens architecture, turns towers into silhouettes. The skyline becomes suggestion, and when people move through it, their outlines are blurred, their steps hushed. We become shadows of ourselves, passing briefly through each other's worlds. There is a unique kind of intimacy to fog. When visibility shrinks, attention sharpens. We become more aware of what is near, our breath, our warmth, the crunch of gravel beneath our shoes. We notice the small things because the big things are hidden. We walk more gently. We listen more closely. Fog invites us inward, and it doesn't need to be seen to be felt. Even after it has lifted, it leaves behind a kind of stillness. Dew clings to grass blades, sparkling in the light. Spider webs hang jeweled and perfect between branches. Windows glisten with condensation. The air feels just a little thicker, just a little cooler, as if the sky had pressed close for a moment and whispered something before stepping back. Fog teaches patience. It does not rush. It does not force. It appears when it chooses and leaves when it's ready. It reminds us that clarity is not always necessary for understanding, that the world is not always sharp or defined, that sometimes to lose the outline of things is to see their shape more clearly. In fog, the boundaries soften, so do we. And as the day warms and the fog retreats into sky, it doesn't vanish. It simply becomes invisible again. The moisture returns to air. The droplets become vapor, and the world continues, just as it did before, but changed if only slightly by the pause, by the quiet, by the sense that for a while we walked through something softer than air. Some weather doesn't merely fall or drift, it spins. It gathers itself into motion, circles inward, and becomes something alive with purpose. You can feel its presence before it arrives, the heaviness in the air, the wind changing its tune, the clouds beginning to curve ever so slightly, as if pulled by some invisible string. These are not just storms, these are systems, spirals of air and energy that grow from the warmth of oceans and the turning of the earth. These are cyclones, hurricanes, typhoons, the storm's most organized and majestic form, born from heat, shaped by rotation, and defined by symmetry. It begins always with warm water, a stretch of ocean that is soaked in sunlight for days, weeks, months, storing energy like a giant, patient battery. The surface warms, the air above it warms, and warm air, eager to rise, begins to lift into the sky, carrying with it moisture, the hidden breath of the sea. As it rises, it cools, and that moisture condenses into clouds. But it also releases heat, and that heat helps the air rise faster. A loop begins. Warm water fuels rising air, which feeds clouds, which release heat, which causes more rising. a self sustaining engine powered by evaporation and the desire of hot air to climb. But the Earth is not still, it spins, and that spin adds a twist. The Coriolis effect, subtle near the equator, stronger further from it, nudges the rising air sideways, turning upward motion into spirals. The storm begins to rotate, slowly at first, then faster. The clouds arrange themselves into bands, curved and elegant, wrapping around a growing center of low pressure. In that center, the air rushes inward and upward, spinning faster as it gets closer, like dancers pulling their arms in to spin tighter. Eventually, if the conditions are just right, an eye forms. Not a metaphorical one, but a real open space in the center of the storm, a calm place surrounded by chaos. In the eye, the air sinks gently, clearing the sky. You can stand beneath the open blue and feel the stillness while walls of cloud and wind swirl in every direction around you. It's a strange, temporary peace, a silence held between crescendos. Around that eye, the eye wall roars. This is where the storm is strongest, where the wind screams, where rain falls sideways, where waves climb skyward. It is a circle of violence, formed from perfect symmetry, a balance of forces that should not be peaceful, yet somehow is. The hurricane becomes a creature now, a system with shape and behavior. It feeds, it moves, it evolves. It is not alive, but it behaves as if it were, searching for warm water, avoiding land, strengthening, weakening, strengthening again. Different names exist in different parts of the world. Hurricanes in the Atlantic and Eastern Pacific, typhoons in the Western Pacific, cyclones in the Indian Ocean. But the mechanics are the same: warm water, moist air, rise in motion, rotation. These are not regional accidents, they are planetary patterns, the atmosphere responding to heat in the only way it knows how, by spinning. Thus storms are massive, hundreds of kilometers wide. Their clouds tower 10 miles high. From space, they look serene, white spirals turning gently over blue oceans. But inside, they are anything but calm. Winds can reach over 200 kilometers per hour. Rain falls in sheets, flooding streets and fields. Storm surges, walls of water pushed ashore by the wind, can reshape coastlines in hours. And yet, even at their worst, there is something awe-inspiring about them. Not just their power, but their order. They are not random. They are structured, logical, elegant, beautiful in the way a glacier or galaxy is beautiful. Dangerous, yes, but also miraculous. A cyclone is not an instant event. It takes time to build. It takes time to unravel. When it moves over cooler water or runs into land, it begins to fade. Cut off from its source of heat, the rising air slows, the structure begins to break, the eye disappears, the bands loosen, rain continues, wind continues. But the storm forgets its symmetry. It becomes scattered, ordinary again. Still dangerous, but no longer majestic. It returns to the cloud and rain it once came from, having passed through its brief life as something more. And in its wake, stories remain. Broken branches, flooded fields, families huddled in candlelight. But also silence, the kind that follows motion, the kind that settles into streets and riverbeds and hearts. The storm passes, but the air remembers. The sky holds the memory a little longer. The birds return, the ground begins to dry, and somewhere far away, the sea warms again. Evaporation begins, a breeze lifts, the cycle prepares to repeat. Even in places untouched by cyclones, their influence is felt. They move heat across the globe, pushing warm air poleward, stirring currents, bending the jet stream. They shape seasons. They water forests. They seed clouds inland with moisture that becomes rain thousands of miles away. They are not interruptions. They are part of the Earth's way of breathing deeply. The spiral is a recurring shape in nature. You see it in galaxies, in snail shells, in the curl of a fern, in the swirling milk in a cup of coffee. It is a pattern that moves outward and inward at the same time, a motion that never quite ends. A hurricane is just one more version of that shape, born from the ocean, shaped by spin and defined by balance. It is a moment where air, water, and warmth agree, just briefly, to move together in perfect form. And though we measure storms in numbers, wind speed, barometric pressure category, we also feel them in the body. The pressure drop that makes ears ache, the wind that sets windows singing, the stillness before landfall where even the birds go quiet. These are the signs, not just of weather, but of scale, of being small beneath something vast. Not all spinning storms become giants. Many try and fail. Conditions change. Dry air cuts in. Winds shear the top from the bottom. The symmetry never forms, the spiral never closes. And yet, even these failures teach us something. That weather is a conversation, not a command. That the ingredients must align, not be forced. That power in the atmosphere is always a matter of balance. And sometimes cyclones appear not over oceans, but over land. Smaller cousins, mesocyclones inside thunderstorms, dust devils in deserts, tornadoes, swift and sharp, forming in seconds, spinning with ferocity. They are brief, localized versions of the same impulse, the atmosphere's desire to turn, to concentrate motion, to form something temporary and fierce, each one a signature written in wind. Yet behind the spiral always is heat. Heat rising, heat moving, energy redistributing. The purpose of the storm is not destruction. It is balance. It is motion finding form. And in that motion, there is a rhythm that connects equator to pole, sea to land, sky to soil. So the next time you see a satellite image of a hurricane, perfect and white, turning slowly across the blue, remember that you are looking at something ancient, a pattern older than language, a system designed by sunlight, sculpted by air, traced by the hand of Earth's spin. And even if you never stand in its path, you are still part of the world that made it. A world that spins, that breathes, that sometimes, when warmed enough, creates something that dances across the ocean with a spiral in its heart. If you could look at the atmosphere from the side, like peeling back a curtain, you would see that it's not just made of rising clouds and drifting breezes. There are boundaries, invisible to the eye, that stretch across the skies like tensioned threads. These are not walls, but transitions, lines where one kind of air meets another, where warm meets cold, where pressure begins to fall or rise. These edges are called fronts. They don't arrive with announcements, but they change everything. The wind, the temperature, the shape of clouds, the very feel of the air. When a front passes through, it's as if the sky has decided to rewrite its mood. Air isn't all the same. Some air is heavy with moisture, some is bone dry. Some has been warmed by the desert, some cooled by snow. These different air masses travel across continents, nudged by wind, shaped by mountains, channeled by valleys. But when two meet, they rarely blend immediately. Like different kinds of paint on water, they slide against each other, each keeping its character. Where they touch, where the contrast is strongest, a front is born. A cold front is where cool, dense air pushes underneath warm air like a wedge. The cold air hugs the ground, forcing the lighter warm air to rise quickly, and rising air is the beginning of clouds, of condensation, of potential storms. Along cold fronts, the sky often builds quickly, tall, dramatic clouds with flat bases and rising towers. Rain may fall in heavy bursts, and behind the front, the air shifts suddenly, cooler, drier, clearer. It's a reset button. The tension breaks, and the weather starts over. A warm front moves more slowly. Here, warm air slides gently over a layer of cooler air, rising gradually, like a sheet being pulled over a bed. The clouds form in layers, cirrus first, high and wispy, then altostratus, then nimbostratus, thick and gray and pregnant with rain. The rainfall is more persistent, more gentle, but it can last for hours, even days. After it passes, the temperature rises slightly, the sky brightens, and the air carries more moisture. It's a quiet kind of change, one that unfolds like a long paragraph instead of a single sentence. There are also stationary fronts, where two air masses meet and neither is strong enough to push the other aside. They settle into an uneasy balance, lingering in place for days, their boundary marked by unsettled skies and scattered showers. The weather here is hesitant, indecisive, like a conversation without conclusion. And then there are occluded fronts, more complex, the product of one front overtaking another, layering the air into spirals and curves that wrap around low pressure centers, like arms around a turning dancer. These are the fronts of maturity, when the storm system begins to unravel, having spun through its prime. All of these fronts are part of larger systems, drawn around centers of pressure. A low pressure system pulls air inward, and as the air converges, it rises, cools, and forms clouds. These systems bring unsettled weather, wind, rain, storms, because the air is in motion, restless and seeking balance. A high pressure system, by contrast, presses downward. The air descends, warming as it goes, drying out. The sky's clear, the wind's calm. High pressure brings stability, but also stillness, a lack of motion that can trap heat or haze or cold. We often talk about pressure in numbers, millibars, inches of mercury, but in truth, we feel it more than we understand it. When pressure drops, some people get headaches. Others feel their joints ache. Animals sense it, grow anxious, restless. It's as though the body, like the sky, responds to compression and release, to the invisible weight of the atmosphere pressing in from all sides. We are creatures built to notice change even when we can't see it. A barometer measures these changes with exquisite sensitivity. Just a rise or fall of a few points can mean a shift from fair weather to storms. In the old days, sailors watched the barometer closely, knowing that falling pressure meant a deepening low and rising seas. Farmers learned to plant and harvest around it. Air pressure is not a minor variable. It is the scaffolding of weather. It sets the stage for clouds to gather, for winds to stir, for rain to fall. Sometimes, the boundary between air masses is sharp. You can feel it walking across a field, one side warm and soft, the other cool and brisk. The wind shifts, the light seems different, your body tenses slightly, as if it knows something has passed. Other times, the change is gradual, more like a slow blending of air, an easing into a new mood. But whether abrupt or subtle, These transitions are the weather's way of changing chapters, and the fronts move. Carried by the winds aloft, they march across continents, following the guidance of the jet stream, a river of fast moving air high above the surface. The jet stream snakes and bends, sometimes racing, sometimes slowing, pulling systems along in its path. When the jet stream dips south, it brings cold air with it. When it rises north, it allows warm air to spread. It's like a string being pulled across the sky, shaping everything below it without ever being seen. Mountains interrupt these flows, forcing air upward, cooling it, forming clouds and precipitation on one side while leaving the other dry. This is the rain shadow effect, lush on one side, arid on the other, all because of the way air must rise and then descend. Geography is not passive, it sculpts weather. Valleys channel wind, coastlines shape storms. Cities, with their heat and concrete, can even create small, low pressure centers, drawing in air and altering local patterns. Even without clouds or storms, the passing of a front can be felt. A sudden shift in wind direction, the scent of rain even when none has fallen, a pressure in the air, like the pause before a thought becomes a word. Weather is made of such moments, transitions and thresholds, the space between what was and what will be. We stand inside it always, not noticing until something moves. And sometimes, the most powerful weather lies not in the extremes, but in these boundaries. Not in the storm itself, but in the moment before it forms. The moment a cold front catches up with the warm one, the moment pressure dips and the clouds begin to thicken. These are the liminal spaces of the sky, where change is constant and subtle, and meaning hides in gradients. The next time you see a weather map full of swirls and symbols, remember that those lines, those blue spikes, those red domes, are not just markers. They are the edges of invisible worlds, the meeting points of journeys long begun, the fingerprints of air moving in silence across thousands of miles. You're not just watching systems, you're watching stories, told in temperature and tension, written in the sky with no ink but air. There are places on Earth where the land holds its breath for months, where rain is a memory and clouds seem to pass by without pause. And then one afternoon, without warning, lightning strikes across a sky that hasn't seen water in weeks. You can smell it before you hear it, the dry burn of ozone, the sudden thrill of static in the air. A rumble rolls across the open plain, and the sky flashes again, but no rain falls. The ground stays dry. The dust stays restless. This is the paradox of a dry thunderstorm, a storm born of heat and height, a storm that roars without offering relief. Dry thunderstorms occur most often in arid regions, places where the air near the ground is so dry that raindrops evaporate before they land. High above, in the towering clouds, moisture condenses and lightning forms, but the rain never touches earth. It falls through a column of hot, thirsty air and disappears before we can feel it. The sky offers the drama of a storm, but withholds its gentleness. What remains is lightning, wind, and silence, a spectacle without surrender. These storms are dangerous not because of what they give, but because of what they take. Lightning that strikes dry grass or brittle brush can ignite wildfires in moments. With no rain to cool the air or soak the soil, the flame spreads fast, carried by wind gusts born in the storm's own downward drafts. In these moments, The atmosphere seems to forget how to nourish and instead becomes something sharp, something fierce. Yet even here, there's a strange beauty. The contrast between the towering, rainless cloud and the dry earth below is like a tension held between opposites, height and depth, water and thirst, promise and delay. In the desert, storms are always rare and often sudden. Heat builds through the day, rising in shimmering waves from the sand. The air grows thick, not with moisture, but with stillness, as if waiting. Then, on the horizon, a curtain of cloud appears, dark and towering. Lightning flickers within it like a heartbeat. Sometimes the rain does reach the ground, but even then it arrives in fat, heavy drops that vanish as they strike, absorbed instantly into the parched earth. The scent of petrichor, dry earth kissed briefly by water, rises and vanishes just as quickly. Everything feels more alive in that moment. Even the rocks seem to exhale. Heat is the constant sculptor in these regions. It creates weather by absence. The land stores energy not as moisture, but as tension, releasing it in bursts, in dust devils, in heat lightning, in sudden windstorms that stir sand into the sky. These winds, called haboobs in parts of the world, roll in like walls, towering clouds of dust that obscure the sun and coat the land in fine powdery silence. It's weather made of earth, not water, dry, tactile, and ancient. Still, even here, moisture finds its way. Some plants harvest dew in the early hours, trapping tiny droplets on their surfaces before the sun claims them. In coastal deserts like the Atacama, fog creeps inland from the sea, feeding life through its veil. The desert is not empty. It is precise. It waits for moments rather than seasons, for inches rather than floods. Its storms are rare, but when they come, they redraw the map. Lightning, in particular, becomes a storyteller in dry places. Without thunderclouds to hide its path, a bolt stands out sharp against the sky. Sometimes it arcs from cloud to cloud, jagged and blue-white, illuminating the contours of the upper atmosphere. Other times, it leaps from cloud to ground in a single stroke, carving light across rock and sand. Each strike is a release, electricity racing to find balance in a world that resists it. And then there is the mirage, another weather-born illusion of the drylands. On scorching days, the ground becomes so hot that it bends the light above it. What we see isn't real, but a reflection of the sky painted onto the ground, shimmering pools that vanish as we approach. The air itself becomes a lens, warping the world into dreams. A tree might appear doubled. A distant ridge may waver and ripple. It's not just heat. It's heat rearranging perception, making the invisible visible in brief, wavering glimpses. Desert weather is not defined by what happens often, but by what happens rarely and how dramatically it arrives. Flash floods, for instance, can carve canyons in minutes. A storm that seems modest at a distance can release a torrent upstream, sending a wall of water through a dry arroyo, tumbling boulders, reshaping the land. The soil, hardened by drought, cannot absorb the water quickly enough. The desert receives its rain all at once, with drama instead of grace, and then, almost just as suddenly, it stops. The clouds move on, the air warms again, the moisture vanishes. But something has changed. A cactus flowers, a lizard drinks from a temporary pool, seeds buried for years crack open and begin to grow, racing against the returning dryness. The storm leaves behind no lasting pools, but it wakes life from deep rest. The rhythm of this kind of weather is not constant, but it is essential. It is the pause before a bloom, the breath before a rush of green. In all this, the atmosphere is doing what it always does, balancing heat and motion, energy and rest. But here the edges are sharper, the contrast more vivid. The absence of water makes every droplet a miracle, every cloud a question. The sky offers itself in riddles, flashes of lightning with no rain, gusts of wind with no warning, shadows without clouds. And we, walking beneath this changing dome, learn to read the subtle signs. In the deep desert night, the temperature plummets. The same air that burned during the day now cools rapidly, radiating heat back into space. The stars sharpen. The ground holds only the memory of warmth. Without moisture to insulate, the desert becomes a place of extremes, hot and cold, calm and fierce, dry and suddenly soaked. Weather here is not gentle, but it is honest. It speaks plainly in bursts and silences, and sometimes, in the deepest part of the night, lightning flickers on a distant ridge. No sound follows, just a silent flash, like the earth blinking. You might think it means nothing, but somewhere, miles away, a cloud is rising. Air is shifting. The atmosphere is remembering something, perhaps an ocean long gone, or the ghost of a storm that passed months before. In dry places, weather moves like memory, slowly, unevenly, but with great consequence. To stand in the heart of a dry storm is to understand something about tension, about the way the world holds its energy, about how beauty doesn't always arrive with softness. Sometimes it crackles, sometimes it burns, sometimes it falls as rain you cannot feel, a storm that disappears before it touches you, leaving only light and wind and the sense that something important has just passed through. Cold doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it slips in quietly overnight, settling into the corners of the room, pressing against windows, coiling gently beneath doors. It curls around the edges of your coat collar, finds your fingers even through your gloves, and makes the morning air feel sharper, more awake. Cold is not merely the absence of heat, it is a presence in itself with weight and will. It gathers in low places, moves with patience, and reveals the invisible architecture of the air. On some mornings, the world is edged in white. Frost blooms across glass like tiny frozen ferns. Grass blades stand stiff and silvery. Breath curls from mouths and delicate clouds. These are the visible traces of cold, the way it paints and outlines, the way it slows and thickens. It doesn't rush in like a thunderstorm. It seeps, it settles, it stays. A cold snap is a sudden drop in temperature, but it is more than numbers on a thermometer. It is air shifting from one kind to another, from a warmer mass to a colder one, often brought on by the movement of high-pressure systems from the Arctic or Antarctic. These systems descend with an elegance that belies their force. They don't roar. They push downward, pressing air toward the surface, squeezing out clouds, draining the sky of warmth. What's left is clarity, sharp blue skies, breathless stillness, and a brightness that feels strangely hollow. The coldest air on Earth is born in the polar regions, where sunlight barely touches the ground for months at a time. In the heart of winter, these vast expanses of snow and ice become reservoirs of cold, immense pools of frigid air that sit in place until something nudges them south. That nudge can come from a shift in the jet stream, a dip in the polar vortex, or a blocking high pressure ridge. When it happens, the cold spills downward like ink across a map, flowing into valleys, pooling in basins, sweeping across plains. Unlike wind or rain, cold doesn't need motion to make its presence felt. It works by stillness. The quieter the air, the deeper the cold. Radiational cooling, where the ground loses heat into the clear night sky, can drop temperatures dramatically in a matter of hours. The air above cools in turn, and frost forms, not from falling ice, but from moisture drawn from the air itself, crystallizing on the surfaces it touches. It's a kind of slow alchemy, where vapor becomes lace. When a cold front passes, you can often feel it like a door swinging open. The wind shifts direction, the air sharpens, and the temperature begins to fall, not just gradually, but with intent. In the span of an hour, warmth seems to retreat. Clouds may vanish, replaced by a sky so clear it feels distant. The light changes, shadows grow crisper. Even the sounds around you seem altered, footsteps louder, distant traffic clearer. Cold redefines space. But cold isn't uniform. It behaves differently depending on where it arrives. In humid places, cold can feel more biting, the moisture in the air helping it cling to skin. In dry regions, cold seems more brittle, like air that might crack. In mountain valleys, cold air settles overnight, flowing downward like water, collecting in the lowest places. In cities, it's softened slightly by the warmth of buildings, vehicles, and human activity, a phenomenon known as the urban heat island effect. But even there, when the cold truly settles in, it finds the cracks. Snow, ice, and frost are not the only signs of cold. Sometimes it arrives under a bright sun, with no visible marker except your breath and the sting in your nose. Other times it carries clouds that spill soft, slow flakes over a silent landscape. On rare occasions, cold combines with humidity to create freezing rain, a delicate and dangerous weather where rain falls as liquid but freezes on contact, sheathing everything in a glassy layer of ice. Trees bend under the weight. Power lines snap. The world glitters, beautiful and brittle. Plants respond by retreating. Leaves fall, sap thickens. Seeds sleep beneath soil, wrapped in dormancy. Animals slow down. Birds fluff their feathers. Bears curl into caves. Insects vanish into bark and rock. The world tucks itself in. Life doesn't stop in the cold, but it changes rhythm. It waits, it rests, and we too adjust. We layer ourselves in warmth, build fires, boil tea, light rooms with softer glows. The cold teaches us about comfort, not in opposition to hardship, but as an answer to it. It reminds us to be gentle with ourselves, to move more slowly, to gather closer. There is a kind of intimacy that only cold brings, a nearness made necessary by the desire to share heat, space, and time. There's history in the cold, too. Whole cultures shaped by the need to survive and thrive in low temperatures. Techniques for preserving food, building shelter, navigating snow and ice. Myths and stories that grew around long winters, when night stretched far and light was rare. Cold has a memory. It shaped migrations, determined harvests, decided wars. Even now, our lives bend to its influence, our cities built to brace against its moods. Sometimes, in the deepest cold, strange things happen. Sounds carry further. Distant noises seem closer. Ice moans and cracks under stress. In polar regions, halos form around the sun, circles of light bent by ice crystals in the air. Light pillars rise from street lamps, narrow beams that stretch skyward, illusions made by frozen moisture reflecting warmth that isn't really there. These are not tricks, but gifts, signs that even in the coldest places, beauty finds form. The sensation of cold is both universal and deeply personal. It wraps around the body, seeps through layers, draws attention inward. It's not just about temperature, it's about presence. Cold is awareness of skin, of air, of the space between. And then, after days or weeks or months, the air begins to shift again. A southern breeze arrives, snow softens, ice begins to weep. The earth starts to exhale. Warmth doesn't return with a trumpet, but with a sigh. And suddenly, the cold seems like a dream, sharp, clear, instructive. A season not just of weather, but of reflection. We remember the cold not just for its bite, but for what it revealed. How still the world can become. How clear the stars are on a frozen night. How sound travels when the ground is white. How quiet we become when the world slows down. Cold doesn't just change the temperature, it changes time. And when we step outside and see the last of the frost melting on a window, when we feel the sun touch our face without burning, when we breathe in and the air feels less like glass and more like water, that is when we know the cold is retreating. Not gone, but easing. Not defeated, but spent. And we too begin to stretch again, to move a little faster, to speak a little louder, to carry the memory of the cold in our skin and in our breath, knowing it will return, but for now, it has loosened its hold. There are times when the sky folds into itself, when air gathers and turns inward, with a purpose so sudden and sharp that it feels almost unnatural. A storm begins to organize not as a wide spiral, but as a vertical twist, something compact, concentrated, intense. There's a stillness first, an uncanny calm. Then the wind picks up, not steadily, but in gusts that seem to change direction, like confused whispers circling a single thought. Clouds grow taller, darker, more textured, like the surface of a restless sea lifted into the air. And then, somewhere within it all, the sky begins to rotate. This is the beginning of a tornado, a weather phenomenon that doesn't drift or pour or float, but spins with focused ferocity. Tornadoes are born from thunderstorms, but not every thunderstorm has what it takes. The most powerful ones are called supercells, storm systems that contain a rotating updraft, a column of rising air that begins to spin due to wind shear. Wind shear is when winds at different heights blow at different speeds or directions, creating a horizontal roll of air. Now picture this horizontal roll being tilted upright by a strong updraft. What once was flat begins to spiral vertically, rising like a ghostly helix into the heart of the storm. Inside a supercell, this rotation, called a mesocyclone, acts like a tightening knot. As it spins faster, air is drawn inward from all sides, pulled into a rapidly spinning column that can stretch from the clouds above to the ground below. When the conditions align, moisture, instability, shear, lift, the funnel forms. It drops from the cloud base like a thread unraveling from a dark fabric. Sometimes it touches the ground, sometimes it doesn't. But when it does, and the swirling column connects earth and sky, a tornado is born. It moves quickly, but not always in a straight line. It curves, dances, hesitates. The air inside it spins at speeds that can exceed 300 kilometers per hour, yet the funnel itself may travel across the land at a walking pace or a gallop. Some are narrow, barely wider than a tree. Others can span more than a kilometer, scouring everything in their path. Each one is different, shaped by the air that birthed it, defined by the land it touches. The air pressure inside a tornado drops rapidly, lower than anywhere else in the surrounding storm. This pressure difference can cause walls to collapse outward, can lift rooftops into the sky, can turn everyday objects into projectiles. But even here, there's more than destruction. There's complexity. Inside the vortex, multiple smaller vortices can form, twisting like braided ropes within the larger funnel. These suction vortices can carve strange patterns into fields, pull trees in spirals, etch curves into the land that remain long after the sky clears. Tornadoes don't announce themselves in shouts. Often the first sign is silence. Then comes a distant rumble, like a freight train passing just beyond a hill. The air turns a strange greenish hue, filtered through the massive volume of moisture in the clouds. The wind no longer comes from one direction. It seems to wrap around you. Leaves swirl upward. Debris moves sideways. There's a tension in the atmosphere, as if the sky is holding its breath. And then, if you're close enough to see it, the funnel appears. It twists from the cloud like a finger made of smoke, thickening, darkening as it gathers dust and debris. It bends and sways, sometimes touching down in one place, lifting, then settling again. It moves with purpose, but also with unpredictability. You don't watch a tornado to understand it. You watch it to witness it. Most tornadoes are brief. They touch down for a few minutes, carve a narrow path, then dissolve as quickly as they formed. But some persist. The strongest can last over an hour, crossing entire counties, their paths mapped in shattered trees, torn fences, and fragments of roofs scattered across open fields. And some travel in families, multiple funnels forming from the same storm, one after another, each tracing its own spiral of motion and consequence. The United States sees more tornadoes than any other country on Earth, particularly in a region known as Tornado Alley, where cold, dry air from Canada meets warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico. The contrast fuels the atmosphere with energy. The flat terrain allows it to organize, and the spring and early summer months provide just the right conditions. But tornadoes can happen almost anywhere, on every continent except Antarctica. Wherever warm and cold collide with just the right spin, the atmosphere may decide to twist. And yet, even tornadoes follow rules. Scientists have learned to recognize their precursors: rotation on radar, hook echoes in storm scans, velocity couplets in the wind fields. Warnings now come faster than ever. We chase them not to marvel at their chaos, but to understand the structure beneath it. Doppler radar, storm spotters, atmospheric models, they all help us read the signs, not to tame the storm, but to live alongside it. There is something haunting about a tornado's aftermath. The storm moves on, but the silence it leaves behind feels deeper. A house without a roof, a tree stripped of its bark, a street covered in leaves from another town. The randomness of its passage, one house untouched, another gone, feels less like chance and more like the work of a sky playing favorites. But it is not personal. A tornado is not cruel, and it is indifferent. It is a shape the air takes when all its elements align in motion. And yet, from this force, something remarkable emerges: resilience. Communities gather. Neighbors share tools, stories, walls. People rebuild. Children draw pictures of the funnel they saw from the basement steps. Scientists map the path, measure the winds, revise their models. The tornado, for all its violence, is also a reminder of the strength of air, the fragility of matter, the speed at which the world can change. Sometimes, the best view of a tornado is from far away, not out of fear, but out of awe. From a distance, you can see its form more clearly: the long, roped funnel, the rotating base, the debris cloud swirling at its feet. You can see the sky around it, boiling with motion, lit by intermittent lightning, echoing with thunder that doesn't end but rolls and rolls, a low growl beneath the surface of everything, and then it lifts. The funnel stretches thinner, unravels, and is gone. The clouds above continue their journey. The wind calms, the rain softens, the sky brightens, and the world below begins to count, to clean, to remember. Tornadoes don't linger. They visit and they vanish. But in their wake, they leave behind stories told in weathered walls and changed lives. In the calm that follows, when the air feels too still and the sky begins to patch itself back together, you can almost forget how fast it all happened, but not entirely. Because something in you, something quiet and watchful, will always remember the sound, the shape, the feeling of the sky turning in on itself. If you could dive beneath the clouds and sink into the surface of the ocean, you would find the roots of the sky's most distant moods. Weather does not belong only to the air above us. It is deeply entangled with the sea below. The ocean breathes into the atmosphere, whispers warmth into the winds, exhales vapor that becomes clouds and storms. It is not just a passive body of water, but an active sculptor of climate, a driver of change, a keeper of long memories. And nowhere is this more visible or more mysterious than in the great oceanic cycles we call El Niño and La Niña. These names, soft and strange, come from the fishermen of South America who notice something unusual every few years around Christmas. The waters along the Pacific coast would grow warmer, fish would vanish, and storms would arrive from strange directions. They called this phenomenon El Niño, the little boy, in reference to the Christ child, and later, its cool counterpart La Niña, the little girl. But these gentle names belie vast systems, ones that reach across oceans, stir the jet stream, reshape rainfall, and warm or cool entire hemispheres. At the heart of these patterns lies a band of warm water in the central and eastern tropical Pacific. In a normal year, trade winds, steady easterlies, blow across the equator from South America toward Asia, pushing warm surface water westward. This piles warmth near Indonesia and Australia, allowing cooler water to rise along the coast of South America in a process known as upwelling. The balance creates a predictable rhythm: warm in the west, cool in the east, steady winds, stable rain patterns. But every few years, something changes. The trade winds weaken or even reverse. The warm water that had gathered in the west begins to drift eastward, spreading out across the central Pacific. The cooler upwelling along South America slows or stops. The sea surface warms over a huge area. The sky, responding as it always does to warmth, shifts its patterns. This is El Niño, a reorganization of heat across the planet's largest ocean, one that reshuffles the weather far beyond its origin. During El Niño years, places that are usually wet become dry, and dry regions may flood. South America's west coast becomes warmer and wetter, while Indonesia and Australia may suffer droughts. Storms shift their paths. The jet stream bends and loops in new ways, carrying rain to California or snow to the southeastern United States. Even regions thousands of miles away feel the change. Africa, India, even the Arctic, all can be touched by this gentle upheaval in the sea. And then after a year or so, the ocean breathes the other way. The trade winds strengthen, blowing harder than usual. Warm surface water is pushed even further west, and cold water wells up more vigorously along South America's coast. The tropical Pacific becomes cooler than normal. This is La Nina, and its effects are often the inverse of El Nino: drought in South America, flooding in Australia, and Southeast Asia, more active hurricane seasons in the Atlantic. These two phases are part of a broader cycle known as ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation. It doesn't operate on a fixed schedule. Some years are neutral, others swing toward warming or cooling. But the effects are vast. Because the Pacific Ocean covers nearly a third of Earth's surface, even a small shift in its temperature can have planetary consequences. It's like moving the furniture in a massive room. The sound changes, the light shifts, the space feels different. The ocean doesn't just store water, it stores heat, and it exchanges that heat with the atmosphere constantly. During El Nino, the extra warmth from the Pacific gets released into the air, raising global temperatures slightly. In fact, the warmest years on record often coincide with strong El Nino events. La Nina, on the other hand, can pull the global temperature down a little, offering a momentary pause in the upward trend. But the long-term warming of the planet continues, and these oceanic cycles now interact with a climate that is itself shifting. We track El Nino and La Nina with satellites, buoys, underwater floats. Scientists watch sea surface temperatures, wind patterns, atmospheric pressure. They look for signs: unusual rainfall in one region, changes in cloud cover, odd shifts in ocean currents. Early warnings help prepare for floods, manage crops, adjust fisheries. The ocean gives us clues if we know how to listen. And yet, for all our instruments and models, these cycles retain their mystery. Why do they begin when they do? Why are some years mild and others dramatic? The answers are wrapped in layers of complexity, in feedback loops between wind and water, between temperature and pressure. The Earth speaks in systems, not straight lines. Even on a local scale, the ocean touches the weather every day. Sea breezes carry cool air inland during summer afternoons. Coastal fog forms when warm air drifts over cold currents. Hurricanes are fueled by warm ocean surfaces, their strength rising in step with sea temperature. Coral reefs bleach during marine heat waves. Fish populations migrate in response to subtle thermal shifts. The line between sea and sky is not a boundary, but a conversation. In some cultures, El Nino and La Nina are woven into stories of rain gods and sky children, of ocean spirits who stir the winds. There's wisdom in those tales, even when the science looks different. They remind us that these cycles are not new. They've shaped human history, influenced harvests, helped or hindered empires. What seems like chaos has always had rhythm, one felt in the wetness of soil, the fullness of rivers, the strength of the monsoon. The ocean remembers. It carries the echoes of ancient storms, the footprints of vanished glaciers. And when it shifts its heat across the world, the sky follows. Clouds gather in new places. Winds wander different paths. Rain falls where it hasn't in years. Somewhere, a drought breaks. Somewhere else, the rivers run dry. And as the cycle turns, we adapt. Farmers adjust planting seasons. Energy grids respond to heating or cooling demands. Fishers track the changing currents. The weather, though never still, finds new patterns. El Nino fades, La Nina rises, then it too dissolves. The ocean returns to balance for a time, but beneath the surface, always, the memory lingers. Warmth gathers again. Wind hesitates. A new pattern begins to form, miles away, months ahead. The sky listens. The ocean speaks. And the weather, in all its complexity, begins again, not from the clouds above, but from the deep, pulsing heart of the sea. If you pause for a moment and listen, not to the world outside, but to the one inside, you may begin to notice something you rarely consider: how your body responds to the weather. Not in the dramatic moments of storm or frost, but in the quiet daily shifts, the way your shoulders lift against a sudden breeze, how your thoughts soften beneath a gray sky, how your energy wanes in the heat or stirs gently in the chill of early morning. Weather, you see, is not only around us, it moves through us. It shapes our breath, our moods, our rhythms. It becomes a part of who we are. Long before satellites and forecasts, our ancestors watched the skies to understand not just nature, but themselves. They sensed the seasons in their bones. They read the wind like a familiar voice. They noticed how a coming rain made them restless, or how a cold morning made their hands ache. Even now, in the age of insulated walls and glowing screens, we feel it. The pressure drop before a storm might trigger a migraine. A dry, windy day can leave us irritable. Sunshine might brighten our outlook. A foggy morning may draw us inward, asking us to move more slowly, to speak more softly. Sunlight, in particular, holds a powerful sway. It regulates our circadian rhythms, the internal clocks that govern our sleep, our hunger, our energy. In the morning, a light wakes the brain, halting the production of melatonin and nudging the body into alertness. In the evening, as the light fades, melatonin rises again, preparing us for sleep. When daylight becomes scarce, during long winters, or in cloudy climates, some people experience seasonal affective disorder, a kind of temporary melancholy that arrives like a low fog and lifts only with the return of light. It's not a weakness, it's the body responding to the sky. Rain has its effects too. For some, it soothes, a soft hush that invites introspection, a rhythm that calms the heart. For others, it carries a heaviness, a dampening of thought, a desire to withdraw. Wind, meanwhile, can agitate. On gusty days, tempers flare more easily. Minds race. It's as if the air itself is stirring us from within. And snow slows everything. It softens sound, muffles movement, reshapes familiar streets. There's a stillness in snow that quiets the mind, that invites a deeper kind of attention. Even humidity leaves its mark. When the air is thick with moisture, we move more slowly, feel heavier. It's not just perception. Our bodies work harder to cool themselves when sweat no longer evaporates easily. On dry days, we may feel sharper, but also parched, our skin and breath craving moisture. Each variation in the air is a conversation with our senses, and our responses are not imagined. They are biological, emotional, instinctual. Weather affects not only the body, but the way we live. It shapes our language, how we describe moods, energy, time. We speak of a stormy relationship, a clouded mind, a bright idea, a cold reception. We say that someone is under the weather, and we know exactly what that means. Our metaphors are not just poetic, they are reflections of how deeply we are tied to the atmosphere. The sky becomes a mirror for our emotions, a language for things we can't always name. And in our memories, weather often plays a central role. The warmth of a summer night shared with someone we loved, the first snowfall that transformed our childhood street into magic, the thunderstorm we watched from the safety of a window, counting the seconds between flash and rumble. These moments stay with us, not just because of what happened, but because of how the weather made it feel. It framed the moment. It shaped our awareness. It wrapped itself around our memory like light around a photograph. Weather also holds meaning in culture, in ritual, in story. The coming of rain is celebrated in arid lands. The return of the sun is welcomed after winter with festivals of fire and light. In some traditions, wind is a spirit, a messenger. In others, snow is purity, or silence, or death. These interpretations don't contradict science, they complement it. They speak to the human experience of weather, not as data, but as presence, as something felt. In art and music, weather becomes texture. The sound of rain tapping on a roof becomes rhythm. The movement of clouds inspires brushstrokes. The shifting light of dawn or dusk becomes a photograph's soul. Weather is the background and the subject. It creates the mood, the tone, the breath of the scene. And in sleep, in the slow descent into rest, weather can guide us. The white noise of rain can lull the mind into softness. The low rumble of thunder can soothe more than startle. The gentle rustling of leaves and wind can become a lullaby. Even the coolness of air on skin can signal the body that it's time to settle, to release, to let go. In this way, weather becomes part of our rest. It joins us in our most vulnerable state, reminding us that we are never entirely indoors, never entirely separate from the world outside. We build walls, wear layers, carry umbrellas. But still, the atmosphere finds us. It touches our lungs, our skin, our pulse. It shapes our days not only through sun and storm, but through softness, through the light that wakes us, the breeze that carries our thoughts, the hush of snow that slows our step. And in the end, we are not merely observers of weather. We are participants. We breathe the air that moves the clouds. We drink the water that once hung in the sky. We feel the sun on our skin, the cold in our fingers. We look up instinctively and read the sky not with science alone, but with memory, with feeling, with a kind of ancient understanding that lives in the body more than in words. So when you step outside tomorrow, whether into fog or wind, into drizzle or light, pause for a moment, breathe in, feel the air, notice the sky. It is not separate. It is not background. It is part of you, and you are part of it. The weather in all its forms is not just the world's voice. It is the rhythm of being alive.